Babe, what's it up these days with like the tweetering and the tickety talking?
Oh, let's get into that. Hey y'all, I'm Andrea.
I'm Nathan.
And you're joining us for Family Friday on the Marriage by Design podcast. Family Friday is a time where we get to talk about God's design for families, what he has to say about parenting and families in the Bible, how we can apply that to our lives. And we've got a couple guests joining us today.
Yeah. So we've jumped into technology this month. And as we talked about last week, super excited to be talking about technology because it's something that has been a huge help to the human race in general. It's a huge, amazing privilege that we have living in 2020 to have all this information right at our fingertips, all these cool apps and things that we can be doing. But so often we're so busy thinking about the benefits, we don't think about the dangers. And as parents who believe in that we have a responsibility to steward our kids the way that God would desire because they're ultimately his kids that he's entrusted to us, we want to make sure we're asking those difficult questions. And so as promised, last week we have brought in a couple of guests that are very near and dear to us and are really on the front lines of knowing what's going on with regards to technology and particularly young people, as well as knowing legally what are the ramifications of having technology at our fingertips. So I will let them introduce themselves, but man, we're so thrilled to have both you guys. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for having us.
So maybe introduce yourselves, a little bit about what you do for a living, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, so my name is Jordan Warnock. I have been working now for almost 7 years as a forensic examiner for the FBI, with the primary function being digital media, social media, anything that has the ability to store any type of images, data, anything like that. But over the past 5 years now, I've been assigned over to our child exploitation task force, which deals primarily with child victims and cyber crimes as its core nature.
Yeah, perfect. And my name's Brandon Stiggy. I work for a local law enforcement officer, but I also work with Jordan. Basically everything he said, I do similar things, only a little bit better. I do it a lot better looking while I do it. So those are the two things that we try to get in concert with and work together. But in all honesty, I've worked child exploitation for the past 7 years. And it's very near and dear to my heart. So when it comes to technology, Jordan and I both are absolutely entrenched in that every day.
Yeah,
and using the front lines is sometimes a cliche, but in this particular situation, I believe it fits the bill. So.
Yeah,
no
totally.
doubt.
Man, guys, thanks so much for being here. So the way I want to do it is just kind of pepper some questions off you guys. And maybe give us your thoughts, just go back and forth, and I'm sure we'll jump in with some other questions. Guys, as you watch this, if you have other questions yourselves, please put them in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, or shoot us an email, marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on the Facebook page. I want you guys to be able to ask the questions that you have as well, because I know that definitely as you listen to this, some questions will come up in your mind, and I'm sure you'll be sitting there going, hey, dope, Nathan, why aren't you asking this obvious question? And I never will. So please send me the question and I'll make sure to get you an answer. Yep. And if we have a lot of questions, then maybe we can convince these guys to do a follow-up some point in the future. So Anyway, maybe to start off, I joke in the cold open about the typical guy that doesn't even know, what tweetering is or, TikTok or Snapchat or all these apps that, it seems like apps come out more quickly than certainly I can keep up with them. And so, as we think about how technology has changed over the years and continues to change, what impact does that have? How do we stay on top of those things? Kind of just talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we need to understand with a lot of this technology is its core premise in a lot of these applications that are out there are connection. They're set up in an effort to make connections with other people significantly easier from our home, our bedroom, things like that. So inherently, these applications are not bad, so to speak, which
Sure.
is the danger of a lot of these, is we look at it at face value and we say, oh, this is a great application that allows for me to communicate with my siblings overseas or do things like that. And it is, but we have to understand that not only is that technology changing, but you also have change in behavior as to how they're being used. You know, for instance, technology that we all grew up with is antiquated and it's museum-like for our kids. They look at it and they're like, what is this?
Sure.
You know, what is what's a dial tone? What's a CD-ROM? What's
Sure.
a floppy disk? Things like that. And we look at them and we're like, man, if we didn't have those things, we couldn't function. Like that was life.
Right.
And so
Right.
recognizing that at the core of technology isn't that things are changing, it's the speed by which it's changing. It's the universal nature that comes out of a mobile device, and it's how many more types of applications, as you pointed out, are out there. So I may be using one to talk with my friends, and I go to school and I'm like, hey, look at this application, and my buddy says, oh man, no, that one's worthless. This is the application you want.
Sure.
They're the same thing at its core premise. They just function a little bit different. And so understanding the change is occurring in the rapid nature, but also with the fact that as more of this stuff becomes digital and allows for us to be in a mobile state, there's dangers that inherently come with that.
Sure.
Because you've got the ability for people to push out information very quickly and the ability for information to stick around for a far, far longer time than it would have been in person, right? I can go to Brandon and tell him that he looks ridiculous with his sunglasses on his head right now. Or I can text him and tell him, man, thanks for doing this, but you looked ridiculous the whole time. Either way, I get my point across. The difference is if I say it to his face, there's possible ramification that's coming from that fairly quickly.
There is guaranteed ramification.
But if I text it to him and just blast it out, there's a different entire response to that. And a lot of times we have a situation nowadays that has kind of become natural for us to communicate with.
Yeah, and earlier, Nathan, you actually asked the question, how do we stay ahead of that? And then Jordan went off on a tangent on something completely not relevant to your question. So let's get back to specifically what you asked. And the answer is you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, there is over 1,300 apps that are introduced to the App Store, Google Play, every month. And so you start adding those up, you're at 20, 30,000 apps a year. And then more and more are trying to be vetted through these app stores every day, right? So everybody's trying to kind of capitalize on this next messaging movement by using the same old architecture. And we say old, so in the technology world, 6 months is old.
6 days is old.
So it is difficult. So just in our lifetime, you can start looking back and the progression of technology. Like we had Betamax, and then it moved to VHS. And does anybody have VHS today? No, and that's only in the last 30 years.
Sure.
So that natural progression of technology has led parents like myself and you guys, and soon to be you, really at a standstill of you're kind of at this fork in the road to say, all right, do I really want to understand technology, or am I here going, it's too much, right? Yeah. And so I'm not going to wade through those types of waters. I'm just going to let my next generation or my children learn it rather than me.
Yeah.
And so, and hopefully throughout this progression, we can talk about what that looks like and how we change the narrative a little bit to say that we need to start educating ourselves at the same mode and fashion.
Right.
Right.
What would you say are the most predominant apps available? The functions of those?
So do you want to say the same one on 3? 1, 2, 3. Snapchat.
Great.
Yeah. Snapchat is not going to go away. It just isn't, and they constantly are changing the way that functions. So yes, Snapchat's claim to fame was that their images, their videos, their content was deleted after a generally anywhere from 5 to 10 second time frame.
And those are deleted forever, right? Like they're never to be found again. They're not. They don't exist anymore.
They'll definitely never come back to bite you.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So the nature of that particular application is that they got clever with it. So when people talk about things being deleted and they're not actually deleted, to save the audience of the nerd speak behind that, What they're talking about is when something is taken, like on your phone, when you take a picture, it writes that to the hardware of the device. Then if you delete it, it is not gone. What Snapchat is doing is never actually writing it to the physical device. They're storing it up to their servers. So when it's deleted, it's flagged by Snapchat to go in and scrub that portion of their server. So as far as parents are concerned, when it comes to Snapchat, if they use that functionality, it will be gone. As far as the application function. Now, the danger with that is from a law enforcement perspective, it's very, very difficult to assist in Snapchat cases because the nature of those applications. Snapchat says we only hold it for 30 days. The legal system, as much as I love it and trust in it, does generally not work within 30 days. So it's very difficult. Now, I will say this. There are also a lot of other applications that allow for users to take screenshots and allow for things to be done to that degree. Now, what Snapchat did, because they got in a lot of trouble, is said, oh, okay, well, we'll alert the end user that there was a picture they sent that was screenshot. Okay, that's great. Now I know that so-and-so has that image, but I cannot do anything about that.
Yeah.
So it's out there. Now, Snapchat is again, it's the hot button one. It's the one that comes up always. But we're talking about applications now like TikTok, formerly used to be Musical.ly, where the content is a little bit different, but the idea is the same. I'm posting out a video or a dialogue of myself to the world, and it's there for a short period of time if I take it down, or it's there for a very long period of time. But the applications, you got TikTok, Snapchat, are your video sharing, your most common image or video sharing platforms. But there are hundreds of them. And that's only one aspect.
And so, the biggest, and we sometimes in America think that we're kind of the only nation that matters sometimes, right? And we forget that globally, India and China and Russia are using applications that we haven't seen yet that eventually trickle down to us. So there are some larger applications that are even more important than Facebook globally, like WhatsApp. They have their own messenger.
Big one, right?
Telegram is another one that has been linked back to ISIS and some Al Qaeda movements, and these it's not just applications that are the 13 to 25-year-olds that are using. These are global applications that people are using to send messages back and forth.
So, sorry, go ahead.
And so I just wanted to really quick talk about that. These iterations of applications change overnight, right? So like I said, if you stay stagnant in the technology world for 5 to 6 months, you become a dinosaur. It's archaic, and different things move up. So that's why you see these reiterations. So when Snapchat came out, all Snapchat had was these pictures that you could send, and they would dissolve or self-destruct in 10 seconds. And that was cool for a little while, but just like anything else, the fad died. And they needed something else. So they were. I would hate to say close to bankruptcy. They probably were not some giant tech company, but they had to reinvent themselves. So they came out with filters. And now you can put puppy dog ears on you, and you're this is amazing, right? And and so people got somewhat sick of that, right? So after a certain period of time, they're like, well, this is dumb. I don't want to do that anymore. All right, cool. Snapchat came up with memories. So now you can look back at all your different memories and find out, hey, that's right. I was with Becky last September, and that was amazing, right? And then people were like, oh, that's not really that cool anymore. So then they came up with stories, right? So now we have stories and memories and filters, and then they came up with their own kind of in-app vault called My Eyes Only, which we don't necessarily need to get into.
But that is the literal name.
That is bad.
But it goes to show you what that type of application. I mean, the name of the vault is called For My Eyes Only by the application. So it's things we have to be aware of. And speaking of the stories are unfiltered. Okay, unfiltered. So you can post anything up there, to and including at one point, Snapchat was allowing an area of it called After Dark.
That's right.
And it was heavily pornographic material. And there was no filter. That was just the way the application functioned.
So that's what I was going to ask is, so what for the parents? Like, we have the TikTok and the Facebook and the Snapchat that are, we're talking about those. But if my kid is just sending out cute videos on TikTok and sending out fun pictures between him and his friends, and on Facebook just connected with friends and they talk sometimes, what's the danger?
Well, there's a lot of dangers. Just like anything, anytime you open that device that can connect to the internet, you're opening the world into your home. And if you're not doing, and we preach this nonstop, and that is education, but not, and this is the one thing that maybe will sound different than the most kind of just PSA, is not educating them, education for the family. So if you're going to say, hey, no, you cannot use that application, or you can only use it in this limited series, you certainly better be educated about that application in which you're going to allow or not allow them to use. So if I'm going to say you can't use TikTok, it's imperative, and I think it's crucial that a parent understands what TikTok does, how it works, what the functions are. I mean, you don't have to write script and be a nerd like Jordan, but you have to understand how it works and how people are going to message back and forth.
You're right.
Kids are too smart. And if you're asking yourself if you will ever get to the level of knowledge of kids in today's generation, then frankly, you're asking the wrong question, because it's integrated. It is a core function of most kids. They go to school and they use technology. They come home and they use technology. Anywhere they are exposed to technology that didn't exist with us. So to Brandon's point, if you go to your child and you tell them, don't use Snapchat, it's bad because it deletes pictures. Children are curious. They are going to know more than you, and if you lie to them, or if they know you don't know how it functions,
you undermine your own authority.
Exactly. You will undermine your own authority, or they will say, okay, I won't use it, but they know how to have it installed under a different name, and then you're only looking for Snapchat, and it's actually something else. Like, kids will be smart, and if you don't know and have an opportunity to talk with them intelligently about your point and viewpoint, your authority will be gone, and the next time a situation comes up, it's going to be much, much more difficult.
And the mentality of me versus my child, and I hate to use that adversarial connotation, but when we're talking about technology, it's not you versus your son or your daughter. It's you versus your son and your daughter and all of their friends.
Yes.
Does that make sense when it comes to your education level of technology?
Sure.
Yes.
So yes, I may know a little bit more than my son or my daughter, but do I know more than my son or my daughter and all their buddies?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right.
And the thing I would say to your point, Andrea, is yes, although your children may just be sending pictures to their friends, let's not forget nor be naive to the fact that if they're using that application, even if they're not necessarily using it in a malicious way or getting themselves caught, they have come across something on that application that they are going to have questions about. Maybe it's heavily pornographic. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's bullying. Maybe it's something that they just don't know how to answer. But when you open that door to a nation/world open internet, they will come across something, even if they're trying to be the best child ever and they're trying to honor parents and whoever. They will come across something of somebody who has used it in a negative way.
So to be clear, you're finding TikTok, Snapchat, maybe name some other ones that are being used for child porn material or just pornographic material and child predatory issues.
I think the all-encompassing, just the easy answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
there's not an application that we have not seen child pornographic material or
very
explicit
explicitly
material on, to include Pinterest, some of the most
Etsy,
benign type things. There's been child pornography traded back and forth. If there's an application or a set application of messaging in the architecture of the application, we've seen it and we've investigated it.
What would you say then are the apps that parents should be aware of, like to make sure that they know a decent amount of?
Yeah, if you're a parent, you go, oh man, well I don't even know $1,300 a month. I wouldn't even know like what are the ones I should really be be educating myself on to be able to talk with my children.
And that's a really good question. I think the top two that just we're going to say, because this is literally what we see is Instagram and Snapchat. Those are the two that we constantly see that information is traded back and forth that we would consider pornographic in nature, or illegal substance is being traded back and forth, pictures of content
bullying,
sextortion, sexting, you name it. But then to be more specific or more individualized, the applications that are on your kids' phones, those are the ones that are being used.
Good call.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So rather than just being generic and saying these are the applications that are used, I would say specifically to the parents, look at the phones, look at the devices, whatever applications are on there. Those are the ones that have the ability or the platform to transport nefarious things.
Yeah, and I would suggest this raises a parenting point that I would humbly suggest. That you have a conversation with your kids, preferably when they're young, and make sure they understand when you are in my home, you do not have an expectation of privacy.
Without a doubt.
You do not get to put locks on your phone that I don't have passwords to. You do not get to have these devices alone in your room. You do not, here's the things you don't get to do, because I think particularly in America, our kids start growing up and they think, well, that's my private stuff, Dad. No, you don't have private stuff in my home. When you move out, that's between you and the Lord, then you can have private stuff, but while you're here, there is no expectation of privacy.
Absolutely right.
And keeping in mind that as much as I say kids are smart because they're growing up with it, they're not that smart. What they did is went to the applications, the store, the Google Store or Apple Store, and they looked them up. And they read about it, and they realized, oh, this application has a hidden calculator, or this has a place I can do this. They read about it. So I highly encourage parents to do the same. If you see an application that you don't know, look it up and research it. And if you deem that appropriate, then you can move forward. But if you don't, then you get rid of it, or you educate yourself to a point where you can have a legitimate conversation.
Sure. Good call. Great. So what about parents, and I come across this a lot, that have younger kids, right? Say 6 to 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, who their kids have access to internet-connected devices, but it's only for gaming.
Right.
They don't have any Instagram or any of that kind of stuff. It's just for online gaming. Is that safe, or what would you suggest in that regard?
So I would say safe is a relative term, and that all comes back to parenting. It really does, or the oversight or guardianship of individuals who are connecting to the internet. Because, like Jordan had alluded to earlier, once you connect to the internet, there's no off button. We all understand that, right? So. And regardless of what filter or what device you're using, even if it is for gaming, you're going to connect to other people. Right? So if I'm going to play a game that's going to be online multiplayer, I'm going to connect to people from all over the world, from various different races and cultures and countries and parts of the world that may deem something that they think is a societal norm different than what we do. So you may hear something being said that is from somebody in Norway, using them ambiguously, but so that you hear on your son's earphones, and you're like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you saying? Right. And so you can't control anything outside of your own environment. And so the answer to that is no, it's not safe, but it's relative to what you can acceptable risk. We use that term a lot. And it does come down to what can you accept as a parent for them to enjoy the online activity or online world that you're specifically speaking of.
And the nature of it in today's world is we have young kids that are sitting there saying, I want to be a gamer. I want to be this. They are aware of the societal norms now when it comes to that kind of stuff. So my point in saying that is we have a lot of people that say, oh, well, then they can't talk to anybody unless it's their friend. That environment doesn't always work. It doesn't always function, because then maybe they can only play the game that they want to play. I don't know whatever they're playing right now. I'll say Fortnite, because it's another still popular one, for 10 minutes when the next door neighbor is available. And maybe that's what you deem as a acceptable risk, but that's not always possible. It's not always there. So there's got to be this understanding that my kid, if they're in an online game, will come in contact with people that they do not know. There's also a difference, though, with how they communicate. I can play a game online because I've done it, and never once say a word, communicate, or pay any attention to what anybody else is doing.
Sure.
But yes, is what you're hearing. But we've also done multiple cases where people are sharing child porn or cyberbullying or any of that through the actual game chat function. So they're sitting there playing a game, and they may be just getting very, very abused, like kind of mentally beat up by the words that they're seeing or hearing.
Sure.
So it's safe. Again, it's that acceptable risk, but recognizing that when you open that door, it's just very hard to control it. Even if you have the best of intentions, at times it may just be that whatever you decide is the appropriate action, maybe it's just sitting down and monitoring, seeing what is coming across their screen.
Right.
Yeah, and the term acceptable risk, I appreciate that term. The thing I think I struggle with is basically what I feel like people are balancing is an acceptable risk with my child's innocence versus I'm going to have a confrontational situation with my child.
Yeah. Right.
Well, to me, it's hard for me to struggle through thinking, well, acceptable risk that they hear. And, we talk about people from other countries. Well, the kid 2 doors down from you might have a completely different belief system about the things he's going to talk about, the things he sees, than your child does. And so when your child is sitting there trying to play a game and is having their mind filled with these things, was that an acceptable risk for not just having a confrontational situation with your child? At some point, we need to understand we probably need to choose the harder path as parents than maybe we at first glance want to do in 2020. Because the other side of what you said is right. I'm not just having the argument with Jackson about whether or not he can play Fortnite. Right. I'm having the argument with Jackson and the other 12 guys on his baseball team because they all play it and we just want to hang out together. That's great. We'll have you over to the house. Right? At some point, we have to be more militant, I think, as parents to say there is not an acceptable risk for you overhearing something pornographic at 10. Right? Maybe when your child's 17 or whatever, maybe you reevaluate that. But mine's not. Mine's 10.
Right.
And, for a 10-year-old, there are not very many things that I deem an acceptable risk when it comes to his innocence.
Yeah. Last week, you and I talked about Dr. Beelan.
Yes.
And her talk, which I think we linked. And one thing she says on there is, as parents, we would never drive our kid to the corner of any street and leave them there for the world to have at, right? Like, you're at the corner of
whatever
the roughest street in the city, and I'm just going to leave you here for a couple hours. Bye. We never do that.
Right.
But yet, we're leaving them on the internet to open to the world without any supervision, any fences around them, and you're just leaving them completely unprotected. And there are things happening that you would be shocked about that Jordan and Brandon have come in contact with right in front of parents' eyes.
Right.
In their home.
Right in their home. Right in front of them. And they don't even know it.
And I would be remiss to say, if we weren't talking on this subject, to specifically say, I don't have children. I have never enforced a home to this point. However,
it's coming.
It is coming. Coming soon. But I would highly recommend an understanding with your children that digital media just doesn't go in their bedrooms or is in a centralized location. I can't tell you what to do, but you need to understand that if their phone is with them in their bed, they're not sleeping. They're just not. And they may not be doing anything bad, but they're not going to bed when you tell them to. They're playing a game. And maybe it's not an online game. Maybe they're being as innocent as possible.
Right. Yes.
But they're still not doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as that, because they're children.
They're just open to
and think about you think about the ways that you rebelled as a kid, right? It wasn't with digital media, but you found ways to not do what your parents were telling you to do.
No,
that's how that's how that works. So we think about this, but I can't tell you
on the line.
I can't tell you how many times, and it's fairly devastating that we'll look at it and it's the same pattern repeating. It's a young individual clearly in their room in the middle of the night when they never should really be
Sure.
engaging in that at that particular point.
Yeah, and let me be clear. If your child is sitting in his or her room having a Bible study with one of their friends until 3 o'clock in the morning, probably still not great because they should be sleeping. They're a child. But I mean, they have school and other things going on. So there's a health side of this. But even beside that, even if you go, oh no, my kid really is an angel, that's great.
The one thing that you brought up, Nathan, that I totally agree with is talking about acceptable risk and saying that this is not something that I want in my house. And that's great. And those are definitely things to think about. But I have a 5-year-old son, and we have this conversation daily. So we talk about what you can do in your environment, right? So when he's at my house, everything that he does is controlled when it comes to technologically advanced internet, cell phone, everything, right?
Yep.
Dad and mom control everything. And I think I would say this to the audience out there, that you should be very comfortable and very confident in your ability to control your own household when it comes to reaching out to the internet. But what we're not talking about, and I think it's very important, is that what happens when he goes to his friend's house?
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So we're not there 24/7. You guys have more than one child, so do I. It's impossible to be everywhere at every time.
That's right.
So the one thing that I would say is we built his faith, and we open it up for comments and conversations that he's had with his friends at school that have to do with this very topic. And he is 5 and he watches Netflix on an iPad, and we control the very things that he watches. So I use this example, and it's a beaming light, and I'm sure this will change, but a friend of his who's also around the same age came over and they wanted to watch a different show. And I overheard my son say, "No, I can't watch that show. My dad would not approve."
Oh man!
And so that's that's something very very strong that I hold in my values and my faith in Him and the Lord. And I know that those are the types of things as parents we should be instilling in our children.
Yeah, that's right.
That when they move out or when they move on from the area that they're in that is controlled by us, that they're going to continue to make the right decision, even if those things, those risks out on the internet present themselves.
Yeah.
So, and age appropriate, at different ages you can talk to them about more and more risks, and this is why we do this, and this is why we want you to make the decisions to not access these certain things when you're at friends' houses. And the hard thing is, it is their choice.
Yes.
Because you can't just keep your child in their home bubble all the time.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you have to trust them to, go to friends' houses and make the right decisions. And sometimes they're not. And
that's right.
There may be consequences for that.
Yep.
That they come across something or whatever that they shouldn't. But having that consistent conversation with them, at least leave that door open that hopefully they'll tell you.
Yep.
Like you were saying.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Having that conversation. What are your friends talking about? Hopefully they'll tell you so that you can get to come down to their age and talk about what is going through their head.
Create that dialogue.
That's
absolutely
right.
And how are they processing this at their age? How can I help them with that at their age?
And I would encourage, I've heard a number of couples that talk about like how they address some of these things, but understanding that when whatever you deem capable of for age appropriate with them, but when they come to you and they ask these things, having an honest conversation. And I know it's terrifying. Trust me, we talk with parents that look at us with this shock and awe on their face because now it's to the point of something extreme and they never even knew how to address it when it was a question. When it was a question, right?
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how to answer those questions, but please know that if you're not honest with your children, somebody else will be, and they will pick it up. And so if you're not having a legitimate conversation, if they come to you and they ask, "Hey, I saw such and such," and your heart starts racing and you're like, "Oh, jeepers, how do I address that? What do I say to my child? He's 5."
Right.
He's still asking the question. So the content is already there. The content is there and he's asking you, or she is asking you. So you need to get past any level of uncomfort with just having a very, frankly, at times, explicit conversation with your young children.
And loving, not in an angry way.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're less likely to come to you if you're angry with them.
Yep.
And Jordan said if you don't give them, I think this is imperative to talk about. So Jordan said if you don't tell them the truth, someone else will.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that might not be
The truth.
the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make
If
sense?
you're having a slant.
Yeah.
No.
That'd be having a
That'd be having a
Yeah,
slant.
so we got to be careful with what we're talking about, especially when it comes to misinformation of stuff. So
Right?
Yeah.
Right. No, that's exactly right.
Absolutely.
We talked when we were talking about parenting in the different age groups a couple of months ago that a big part of that is we have to. So often when our kids are 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, and they do the like, hey dad, hey dad, and then you say what is it? And they just give you that smile, and then they go back to what they were doing. It's important that we sow into that as parents, because if you give your children at 2, 3, 4 this idea that I don't have time for this, then when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to 18, the first thought in their head is going to be, Dad doesn't really have time. I don't want to bother him with this thing.
Or he doesn't care.
Right? Or he doesn't care. Right? And so really sowing into that at a young age to make sure our kids know, I may not always do it right, but I will set aside whatever I'm doing so that you and I can talk about the things that are going on in your life.
And if we're doing absolute full disclosure, I will tell you that technology is one of the best and most greatest things ever invented when it comes to iPads and Netflix, especially when I want to do something around the house and my 5 and my 3-year-old want an iPad. And I have to really honestly look inside myself and say, all right, I need 40 minutes. I think that iPad's probably going to give me a good 40 minutes, right?
Right.
And
you're
so
right.
but that's just me being honest. And I've done it before, and I've fallen victim to that. And I will fall victim to that again moving forward. But the thing is what we were talking about earlier of monitoring your children. Sometimes as parents, we're just lazy.
Yeah.
And if we don't have
That's true.
that introspection, that self-awareness to say, all right, it's time to really put ourselves together and engage in our children's lives. My wife and I have found that our children respond to that in such a positive light that it almost makes us really forget that, like, oh yeah, we didn't even look at our iPads today, or we didn't do this. So I would suggest, I know Jordan does this with his family, and I'm sure that'll be something that continues. I'm sure Nathan and Andrea do too, but we do no media during the weekdays. And so every time when they get home, we do an activity, right? Yeah. So we do a coloring activity or something that engages them with their parents, and we do it around a desk or a table or something. So that becomes a safe place for them.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend, when it comes to technology, not relying so much on it, and just being heavily consistent with what your direction is.
Yeah. Part of the danger is that 40 minutes feels so good that then the next day
That's
it's
exactly
55,
it. That's exactly
and then
it.
it's 2 hours, and pretty soon your iPad's a full-time babysitter.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so, all right, in the little bit of time we have left, there's two questions left that I want to cover. So the first one is, when we talk about internet-connected devices and technology, it's easy as parents to go, well, yes, I know there's cyberbullying, I know there's explicit material, but that's like something that, I don't even know anybody whose life was affected by that. So what's really the likelihood of our children being exposed to those types of things online?
At some point, 100%.
And that some point is getting earlier and earlier. I mean, we have been called in a number of times to speak to 10, 11-year-olds in a school because it's such a bad situation at that particular school that the teachers and the principal are aware of the fact that this stuff's getting sent out on a regular basis. They're 10 and 11.
Yeah.
We've done times where we'll address the crowd, and we set it up in such a way that they can text into us anonymously so that we're not picking on any one kid. And they feed us questions. And when you do that, you get two things. You get real honesty, and you get some heartbreaking questions at that age. And I promise you, and the reason we're strong on this is if you heard or saw a story about something that's going on in a school, it probably also is or has gone on in your child's school. It just probably has.
And so more to the point, Nathan, you asked specifically, what's the likelihood? and I don't know if you use the word victim or not, but and I obviously said 100%. I know Jordan agrees with me at some point because the overall exposure is there. So let's say my son, who's going to be going to kindergarten next year, may not experience something specifically to him, but if he hears it, if he sees it or witnesses it, is he still experiencing the same exact, that visceral trauma? Absolutely.
Sure.
And you have that small incremental pressure over time. It starts affecting the psychology of your children,
right?
And that's what we want to avoid.
Right. In our experience dealing with couples that are in crisis, a lot of times when there's pornographic issues, typically on the guy's side, although that's increasingly not only the husband's side, but when we see that, almost universally, their first time being exposed to pornography, they were a victim.
Right.
Where it wasn't, they weren't seeking it out.
Right.
It was an older brother of a buddy that showed him a magazine, or their friend's dad who had a stash of something in the bathroom, or whatever. That they, or they inadvertently, they were searching for, Madeline book, and they hit the B instead of the K and searched Madeline boob, and up it came, right? There's no like, oops, my bad, let me fix that before something bad happens. It just happens.
Right, yeah, right.
And so, inadvertently, they were victimized by what happened, and it spun off into a lifestyle of being stuck into something that they got inadvertently dragged into in the beginning.
And when that happens, keeping in mind back to what we were talking about, when you get that shock factor because it's the first exposure, they're going to have to go somewhere with that.
Right.
It's either going to stay internal and it's going to develop and they're going to fill in the blanks where they feel they need to, or they're going to go find the answers somewhere.
Yep.
So we just need to, again, keep in mind that if a question comes up, it's because the exposure has already occurred, and there's got to be some proactive steps with that.
Yeah.
But it's crazy the amount. I don't think there's a specific grade that I could say, but I know from our experience, 5th and 6th grade was as early as we have spoken to, and the questions we got from those children were indicative of a knowledge much higher than what they were. And so we are talking about a shift now. We also talked to the high school. And it was interesting. You'd think more of the juvenile kind of questions would come from the high schoolers. Quite frankly, guys, it's not. It's far more developed, far more adult conversations coming from the high schoolers, and the trivial kind of juvenile ones are coming from 5th and 6th. So keep that in mind. We're talking about adulthood shifting much younger.
It's that innocence.
And they have a knowledge that, frankly, would shock, I think, probably most of their parents.
Yeah.
Some of the language that they use. And again, they're fairly explicit with the stuff they say to us because there's anonymity and they don't know. But the language, the conversation, and the hurt, frankly, the hurt is far more real than I think people are aware of at a much younger age.
Yeah. We use this example, and I've used it several times before. Jordan's obviously much younger than us, but
never.
So when I was in junior high, maybe 5th, 6th grade, I still remember specifically getting the JCPenney catalog, right? And in that JCPenney catalog in the middle was the lingerie section.
Yep.
And I have 4 older brothers, and they had exposed me to the JCPenney catalog.
Sure.
And so, of course, I had to pick up what it's called an old landline. And then, I had to punch in a bunch of numbers to call my buddy. And it wasn't on him. He actually had to be home. And so he answered the phone, and I'm like, hey, did you see the JCPenney catalog? So I use that, and it's it parallels to what's going on today in the sense that you don't have to wait for the JCPenney catalog anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And it is literally at your fingertips. It's in your pocket. It's in your backpack. It goes to school with you. You can look those things up. And unfortunately, way worse than that, it comes to you free of charge.
This is the I'm going down the nostalgic road.
Right.
I was just talking about this with some other buddies where they were like, and occasionally you'd stay up late and you'd flip to Cinemax where your parents didn't get it,
right?
But
it'd be fuzzy a little bit, and you're like, I feel like
is that what? No, is that what? I'm pretty sure.
That's exactly it. That's exactly right.
And now for free on Amazon Prime, there's dozens of shows
In
that have
4K.
entire scenes
in
of that.
4K.
Right.
So you don't got to worry about
Right.
fuzzy.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Crazy.
And Brendan made the point too, where he called his buddy. Right. Keep this in mind. Nowadays, it ain't calling anybody. It's blasting the image you saw out
that's a
to
good
all
call.
of your buddies.
Great
So
call.
we're not talking about picking up the phone and calling anymore. It's like, hey man, look at this, and they are attaching the physical
Yes.
image. So your child might get it, and still, again,
Not even have a choice.
choice.
Right.
And they don't even know.
But once you see, you've
Yeah,
seen,
but what
you've seen.
exactly?
right.
You cannot
Right.
take that
That's
back,
right.
and that's
Doesn't go
what
away.
I think most guys, not every guy, but I think most guys in a situation where it was exposed to them could go back to that very day
Right.
because it's a moment that's like, whoa! It just totally altered the universe by which you were living in.
Right.
It just does,
Right.
and that's not. Again, we're talking about pornographic material. Cyberbullying is a big one as well, guys. When they see something, the joking, hey, I'm gonna blow up the school, or an actual threat to the school. We live in an environment where the kids see the news too. They know that this stuff is occurring,
Yeah.
and so when they're seeing that also is altering this level of security that they have.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
so it's a different. Again, there's multiple different ways that their world will change, but cyber in digital media in the cyber universe is a fast-moving behemoth when
Sure.
it comes to a lot of the things
Yeah.
that they can
And
see.
it demands instant gratification.
Yes,
sure.
It
Yes, it
demands
does.
it.
Sure. Okay, so let's and we're going a little bit long, but that's okay. So let's take 5 minutes, and really, all of this comes down to a question that I want to ask and let you guys just share your thoughts. We've talked about this a little bit throughout, but at the end of the day, what do we do to protect our kids? I mean, how can we try and help maintain that innocence as long as we can, particularly when that innocence seems to be taken at a younger and younger age? So what can we do?
Build a foundation. Absolutely imperative that you communicate with your child and learn with them. Learn the technology that they're learning at the same time. If you don't have a good grasp on it, really, really develop that narrative between you guys. And I don't mean like sitting down and communicating talk-wise. I'm saying engage in the same activity that they are. If they're on PBS application, get on that PBS app. Great app, by the way. And they're watching Wildcrats. Watch Wildcrats with them. Know that, you know what I mean?
Right.
Know the names of don't just set it up, walk away. If they're going to be on ABC Mouse, get on ABC Mouse with them and do those things and those activities, engage with them. Because all that does is strengthen that bond every single day. For you to say, all right, hey, what app are we on today? Oh,
Right.
cool. Okay, so then when they move to the apps that now we're scared about, right?
Right.
And we're nervous about, we don't have to be lazy and we don't have to be scared because we're going to be able to create that narrative
It's a good
between
call.
one another.
Great call.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
It takes away the adversarial
It does.
nature and becomes
It does.
something we do together.
that's
Yes.
absolutely right.
It's great.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can. That was a great answer. I can default to Brandon with kids. I think the biggest thing we see a lot with parents is they missed that first couple
Yes.
years, and they've never been able to catch up.
So what they do is it's one of two. They shut it all out. You cannot do it.
Yep.
And this is 2020. Now you actually can't, right? So some people aren't going to school. You actually can't not have technology in your house.
Yeah,
Right.
especially. Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
it's there whether you want it or not.
Yeah, you're right.
And so whether you want to be lazy or inconsistent or you want to be strict, you have to let your children e-learn.
Yeah.
And so with that comes obviously
Opportunity. Sure.
opportunity, responsibilities. and-
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And even the most well-intentioned teachers, not speaking anything against that, but they have a curriculum now, and a lot of them have to address cyberbullying or
Right.
possibly even sexting. And if it gets to that point, or it gets to a point where the school or any level of system that your kids aren't getting from inside the house becomes their core go-to for any level of anything, whether that's social experiences, whether that's any level of education, whether that's religion, whatever it may be, if it becomes that, then that narrative is very difficult to rebuild.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they've already bypassed and they've got something that they've trusted now for X number of time, and to rebuild that and let them see you as the person who to go to is difficult. And so we have these situations where, again, parents, a lot of times are fearful of the nature of digital media because it's moving at such a fast pace.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many parents that it's like, I'll have this smartphone, and yes, I upgraded to a smartphone, but I had a flip phone for 10 years prior to that, and I'll have this one till I die, right? Like, as much as I love that, and I understand some of them get very expensive, we cannot live in a world where we accept the fact that just because I am not able to function at that pace or willing to buy the next greatest thing, our children probably don't share that same mentality.
Yeah,
Right.
You're absolutely
And
right.
so it gets to a situation where you will look at it and you will say, I'm just too far gone. But that's never the right answer.
Yeah.
You have to stay at a level of maintaining education in this field.
So Brandon, I want to follow up on something you said. Jordan, thanks. That was that was great. But I know for sure. That's right, Jordan. That's enough.
I told you I don't have kids. I'm trying.
Well, I know for sure we've got a couple of folks in our audience that I talk to. They call me routinely, and their biggest concern is I didn't know because I didn't have a relationship with the Lord. I didn't take this seriously when my kids were young. Now they're teenagers.
Yep.
What can we do as parents?
I wouldn't change my answer even a little bit. I would say still open that dialogue. I mean, there's always a chance to open the narrative. And will it be your first try? No. Will you be able to sit down and go, hey, let's go over WhatsApp or let's go over Telegram? That's not going to work. But what if you do this for 5 days in a row, right? 10 days in a row, 15, whatever. Name your days in a row that you keep saying, hey, let's go over this. Hey, what if you start using it and you're like, hey, did you see that story on Snapchat today over in Benson area? You know what I mean? Like continually trying to open that narrative.
Sure.
And the long answer, or maybe the hard answer is maybe you never do. I think you just have to be honest. And maybe that narrative is never open, but it will never open if you don't try.
That's good. That's great. And you and I have been talking quite a bit this month on our Thursday about that exact thing. That sometimes doing the right thing, it's not, the result is their deal. Right? I mean, you might do the right thing, and we do the right thing because we're acting out of obedience to the Lord. And if we don't get any difference out of that, we're still being obedient to the Lord.
Yeah,
that's a great call.
The other thing that we talked about was not a good idea to let kids have the internet in their room, right?
Yes.
As far as answering your question with protecting kids.
Yeah,
just
that's
not letting them have their devices and the internet and all that in their bedrooms.
Yes. We both are 100% sound and in concert with one another when we say that that's historically a bad idea. And I have 15 years of law enforcement experience to show you that that's a bad idea.
Sure.
They at some level or some degree should be monitored.
Yeah.
They really should, until you get to a certain level where you've built that trust.
Right.
And you know that, hey, my 13 or 14-year-old is going to do the right thing 9 out of 10 times. Because we can't say every time, right?
Sure.
But we have to know that I gave them the best foundation I can as a parent, to know that when you go out to that nasty world that's going to treat you wrong and say bad things, that you're ready to take those on and you're ready to protect those around you as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yep,
awesome, guys. Thank you so much for being here, guys. We focus more this week on the actual technology side of it. Next week we're gonna have Jordan and Brandon back, and we're gonna focus a little bit more on the law side of it. Right? What's the law do to protect us? What does the law really mean? How does that affect our children? And really focus a little bit more into that area, because I know a lot of people have questions about that as well. So until then, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great Friday and a good weekend. We'll see you back next Monday. Have a great weekend. And remember, God is for your family. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at Marriage by Design Podcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is at MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.